All right, now that we are on the hour, I think this would be a good time to start. What do you think, Alex?
I'm ready when you are.
Excellent, excellent. Well, let me the first to welcome you all to today's webinar. Thank you so much for taking the time and joining us today. My name is Samantha Macbeth, and I'm one of the co-founders of ECOP Canada. And I am absolutely delighted to be able to introduce my good friend and an internal mentor and inspiration, Alex. Today, we will be opening up this discussion as you are all in here as part, not as an audience to a webinar, but really as people who are in the room. So the subject of today is really approaching the ocean decade in the Canadian context, and how to best work together towards that ocean we want. And why do I mention specifically the Canadian context? Well, Canada is a country with 3 coastlines. We have the Atlantic, we have the Arctic Ocean, and we have the Pacific Ocean. But more specifically, those areas are the ancestral and unceded homelands of many, many, many different First Nations Inuit peoples in Canada. We have Mi'kma'ki to the east, we have Inuit Nanangat to the north, we have Haida Gwaii, the Salish Coast, and Vancouver Island to the west. So being able to achieve meaningful, engaging, long-lasting ocean stewardship, ocean science, sustainability will require everyone to work together. And I think that today is a great opportunity in the context of Indigenous Month, a week after International Indigenous Day, in the context of Ocean Month. There's a lot of overlap when it comes to June. And this is a good place to have that conversation, to learn a little bit about those realities, but also, creating an area where you are more than open and free to ask the questions that you'd like to ask. There's no dumb questions, there's no silly questions. That's what today's conversation is all about. Now, one little bit of housekeeping. I'm going to give the floor to Alexandra Anaviapik in just 1 second, but please, during as other people are talking, please keep your mics and cameras off, just to maintain the best streaming possible. I know some people are coming in from rather remote areas, and we want to be able for them to see and hear. If at any point you need to drop out of the call or you lose the call, we are recording today's session, and we'll make it be available for future consultation. If you have a question, or if you want to be able to jump into the conversation, I would ask that you either ask in the chat function. So just say, hey, I have a question, here's my question, and I'll be able to slide you through, or we'll have a period at the end that will be a little bit more open and free flow. So again, I'm on behalf of ECOP Canada, thank you so much for taking the time, and we are more than happy and very grateful to be able to introduce Alex. Take it away, Alex.
Kaya namisa Macbeth. Tunga sugitit tavani katemanagata tekwa kano tekwa nunamiu kano ikayara kakatiko tikwa imang mi atokata tinga kano is ikayara kakatapo overuni kano isa magakapo mana kalunano nanganito nga overuni aldaw nunanganito nga kisiane tana nunagingita ikayo ko makatatakataw ilanikutaw like narorikatangata ayok sa koyakatatu. So my name is Alexandra Anaviapik, or Alex Anaviapik for short. What I just reiterated here is I'm originally from Pond Inlet, Mitimatalik, or from Nunavut. I'm currently in Ottawa. The White Kalunat Nunangat was what we used to refer it, or still do. It's white people's land, even though we're on Indigenous land here too, and they're not my homeland. Sometimes when you're outside of your homeland or outside of your environment, it's kind of hard to grasp the idea of how can we support Indigenous populations, or how to support the environment, or how to support any organizations or any movements. So this is the conversation that I would like to have. I started with my mother tongue, Inuktitut, even though it kind of went dragged along just for a little bit. But sometimes we also kind of crisscross in terms of translation. What does it mean to support an organization or Indigenous people or for anything? Is you would ask people who are of the area how to support them instead of coming in. It's like, I know what your problem is. I know what you're going through. Therefore, I can save you. Sometimes that can work, sometimes not really. So this is just a conversation. It doesn't necessarily mean I will be right. This doesn't necessarily mean ECOP will always get it right or anyone will get it right. It's a conversation. It's a start. And again, I can't really see the questions at the moment. And Sam, we can answer the questions later. But in the meantime, yeah, so welcome. One of the harder parts is the actual lost in translation. My homeland, Mitimatalik, it's the ice is breaking up at the flow edge. There's a lot of narwhals coming in. There's a lot of seals. You could see on social media, especially on Facebook, where I'm kind of jealous that my friends and my family are getting to enjoy that kind of season. But with my experience, I know what it feels like. I know what the temperature would feel like. I can read the ice some bit. Sharing food, it's a huge thing. My dad doesn't really necessarily hunt anymore, but that doesn't mean he will stop having country food because we have a community that we help each other no matter what any situation. So the ice, what does it mean for you? So people here in Ottawa, and maybe the Ottawa Canal during Winterfest. In the prairies, maybe a small pond or a small creek or a river. The Salish, Coast Salish, oh, there's a lot of wildlife over there, a lot of strength in that water. And the Mi'kmaq and the Innu and the Inuit in the East Coast, their ice, to some areas that will have ice, it will mean something different for them. So I really want you to think, what does it mean for you? Now, does it mean not very safe areas where you want to go skating? Or is it another area where you're very comfortable in terms of going into that environment? Then the next question is, what would you do or where would you start in terms of identifying any issues? Water freezing up too late in the fall or winter? Or so there's new cracks in the ice. It's not safe anymore. How do you start noticing differences? And then the question would be, how do you voice these concerns? Who do you voice it to? Who's going to listen? But not only listen, to take these concerns very seriously. Now, for those who are very familiar with climate change, you can talk to your MLAs, your mayors, your councils, any organizations that can help you voice your concerns. But not everybody has that. So where do you start? Now, these are really tough questions for small communities. Sometimes these voices aren't really heard. And then when your gears start going in terms of identifying something, in terms of the ice or the water or the wildlife, who do you go to voice these? Are you going to be listened to? If they're trying to listen to you, what kind of conversation is it being had? Is it where two different parties are having this kind of conversation, or one voice is saying the concerns, but the other one's having a deaf ear? Sometimes, or most of the times, that can happen. Voicing your concerns and having a deaf ear for someone who is in power or who has the ability to voice these concerns to a bigger audience, probably the UN or the feds or even your town council. And these types of conversations, I know they've been had before. And once you keep going through and you're not being heard, sometimes you could be a bit of a defeatist because you keep hearing them and you keep voicing them, but you're not being heard. And then the story goes, well, there are other researchers and other organizations that are coming in and saying, here's your problem, here's what's happening, here's the climate change, here's what's going on with the wildlife. We know how to fix it. But the other group that had these concerns, even though they voiced it over and over, well, do they want to have the energy to interact with you or anyone within an organization or who has the power to listen and listen well? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. For my specific area, I know we had a lot of researchers that would come into pond, and we have the goose camp, but we don't really know what's happening in the goose camp. The research isn't really shared. And then there's these other researchers that are coming in, these white knight saviors kind of feel. So the locals would just kind of, once there's a researcher from a university, a researcher for the federals, two researchers for this and that, but they're always asking the same question. But not only the question, they always know what the same problem is. Now you can try and solve one problem in several different ways. But if you're an armchair person who sticks behind a desk, even though who has the authority to change a lot of things, do you necessarily know the entire story? Yes and no, because a lot of these information are really big and they kind of get funneled down through. And you're going to get the small concentrated part. And this one small concentrated part to solve the bigger issue dilutes. It's like dropping a colored ink into a liter of a jug of water. You don't necessarily have that kind of impact, but it's a start. It's a real big start, at least. It's not to, this is what I'm saying is, it's not to necessarily put down any hope or put down any organization. Like ECOP is, we're fairly new. And I'm not just with ECOP, I'm with other organizations and things. It's just, sometimes it's so easy to see these issues separately and knowing how to separate them. But sometimes like it's easier to see these different issues and know how to solve it or have this kind of conversation together. This by having this Inuit or who people who live in these areas, who experienced it, who lived it, know the old stories, know the environment, and know the people. We're there all the time. And we're always observing the environment. And not only that, like for a research to start, you only see this kind of this amount out of the entire year, just for this small amount of time that you have in that specific area. And then the data collection to gather these stories from locals, from people around the area. It might sound like a lot. It may sound like it could be a ton of work, but there's no deadline. There's no deadline for any of our stories or any of our communication. With a project or research, there is a deadline. You have to go through ethics, you have to find funding, you have to find the people, you have to make your scratch to start from scratch, but you have to follow colonial rules, if you will, because these ethics and these rules and policies are not necessarily in what how the community goes through or how it works. So then the question would be, how do I move forward with this? Here's the great thing about science, and either social science, hard science, or any research, is that the Indigenous culture from not just within Canada, but from all over are being heard, which is extremely fantastic. It's a slow movement, but it's getting there. And I'm really proud of that. I'm really proud to be a small drop in this huge, vast world with ECOP or other areas to get our voices heard. And traditional storytelling, especially how we tell things and how I heard things, is we're not very linear. Sometimes we'll go back and then do it again and go back and do it again. So I know I just gave this little example of questions to think about, scenarios that you may have had, or interactions that you may have had, or these hurdles you had to go through to do what you need to do and to get to where you need to be. So I'd like to go back again and say, what does ice mean to you? What does the ocean mean to you? Excuse me. For me, it's food. It's culture, it's language, it's way of life. Majority of my diet that I grew up with are char and seals and narwhal, not a lot of belugas and ponelet. But it brings my family together. And my grandmother taught me how to hook a seal when I was a kid, even though not necessarily the greatest hunter, but I remember that interaction. I remember being part of my family's journey, going through the ice, going camping, going on boat rides, or even a weekend trip. It brings us together. And not only that, there's different terminologies of either different types of ice. Like they say Inuit or Eskimo have these 40 different words for snow. Maybe that's true, because we do have different dialects, and we're ranging from Greenland all the way to Siberia with the Chukotka and the Yuppiks and Inupiaks and Inuit and Greenlandic Inuit. With these different dialects, we may have 40, possibly. But I'd like to change this in terms of English has the same. If you don't believe me, take about 10 seconds to think of how many different types of ice do you know? Well, it's not necessarily ice. Then what are the conditions of the state of water? You got your sleet, your slush, your snow, your hail, your icebergs, your first year ice, multi-year ice, glaciers, fluffy snow, wet snow. Yeah, English just has about the same, or even more, depending on if you're going to be using it in a scientific research or storytelling or in a newspaper. How would you describe an environment that you've never been to? You add more words to it to give this picture. And then how does one listen to these words? How do you listen properly? Because I can only tell this little webinar for a little bit, and then we'll answer some questions later. But it starts by being human. by being a friend. When you first start to get to know someone, oh, what do you do? Who are you? Who are you? Where are you coming from? Did you go to university? Did you go to college? What community did you go to? Did you travel anywhere? What's your favorite hobby? Your favorite food? Favorite place to visit? It's starting to get to know people, right? The more you know people within the environment that have certain issues, like a reservation on having clean, proper water for over a decade. You get to know the people first, see how they live, be part of that, live with them. It's only when you start seeing them as people instead of an issue of a problem, it kind of starts to open up more ways in terms of how you are able to communicate effectively to the population, to a population and to an organization and vice versa. It's these human connections. If you have a dear friend who is very careful of how they produce garbage within their own apartment or home, do they recycle? Do they collect these little mason jars and put in other little seedlings? Do they go out hunting and that meat for the year, do they share the meat? Do they have a little garden? Once you start caring for a person that way and understand how they live, it also affects you as a person because that's how you want to help your friend. So I never really knew about recycling. I had to learn how to recycle here in the South. Of course, we have different dumps, different areas for wood pile here, like major electronics over here, general garbage, etc. But that's kind of all I knew and never really had to think about it until I got here. I never really had to think about planting trees. Do you plant trees? What kind of trees what kind of trees are there? Or even learning how to read the street lights, green, orange, or yellow, depending on where you are, and red. Well, thanks to the movies, I kind of knew what it was like before, but never really, I had to really think about it first before I had to go. Now it's automatic. So with these practices that we have as humans, we can raise any issues all we want and get ourselves heard. But ultimately, in the end, it's about being human and having these sort of connections. And these connections from, like, I'm out of place. You can see I'm sweating and perspirating a bit. But I'm always still learning how to be human and help however I can. And listen to how they want to be listened to. Inuktitut is my first language, English second, sarcastically third is sarcasm. But no, it's humor, you know. But yeah, it's just, you have to learn how to listen and filter it how they see it. By doing so, you're going to go a lot further and a lot farther with not just being able to also advocate, but having a stronger community from who you're listening from. Give a break here. Do we have any questions or any point of where we spoke, Sam?
I think people are gathering their thoughts. A lot of important points. Maybe I would launch you with a question I have as I'm listening to you. You know, looking at people's relationship with the ocean, and how Mitimatalik, specifically Rock Pond Inlet, has been changing, as a port, as an area where there's more and more access to the ocean, and the ice is different. What would be your perfect ideal changes that you would see, like the way that, or maybe not changes, just like how would you like to see that grow, that relationship with the ocean, and how to keep the ocean important in day-to-day life? Like, what would be your ideal? It could be specific to Pond or Nunavut or even across Canada, but I think be nice to look at it from a small perspective, from one community.
Mm. This is a really amazing question because I have two parts to this. One, policies and things that I'd like to see. And the other is cultural. I know, feeling just like an individual person, climate change is just too big. Therefore, what's the point? For me, as someone who grew up around the ice in that environment, my culture is bigger than the climate. Therefore, I should not be able to give up on my culture. As anyone knows, within Nunavut, there's no highways. There's no way to get to Iqaluit by car, the capital. There's no way to get to another community during the summer, except when you have this small little window of time with your 25-foot aluminum boat or a small kayak, not kayak, boat, or a small window of time that you have to practice using your kayak. And I would like to help preserve that. But that means also advocating to the rest of the world, saying, hey, it's not just the polar bears, that it's their home. There's an entire culture, the language, the food, the clothing, the little ones, like these little babies, you just see them with the big cheeks. You just want to grab them and just go and just throw them out the window. I can't really necessarily do that here. There's stranger danger and things. But my culture is worth preserving, not just mine. Every other Indigenous culture is worth preserving in any coast. And then you have to learn how to support them that way too. So my idea is to keep seeing my family and my friends and other Inuit and all over the Arctic, or any Indigenous culture practicing their culture, learning how to hunt, prepare the skins, even practicing the language. I stumble still, but that doesn't mean I would give up. The other part is not just preserving my culture, but also having people from the area being heard and not trying to be bad actors or send off false, like these fake news that you keep hearing. One of the examples is in Pond Inlet, there is a mine nearby. Now the iron, it's extremely rich, it's high quality, and there's enough of it that can be in operation for decades. And they played dirty in terms of sending off false information. That if phase 2 out of phase whichever does not go past, therefore this research station within Pond Inlet will not be built. Technically, it still can be built because they only sent over just 5% of the entire budget. So they're only a small contributor to this research station, but that information right there is already false. Under NERB, a Nunavut Impact Review Board, we had these hearings, and there were plenty of evidence, not just from the locals, but from different research that was not taken accounted for. Now, mind you, this is not all the entire story of it, but this is just a percentage. Phase 2 was denied. Then the mine tried to go to the minister, hoping phase 2 can continue. Now that was a dirty move because it was already denied. Thankfully, the minister said no. There was already a ruling. But we know the fight is not done. There's still going to be ways in terms of trying to get either phase 2 or any of these sort of situations that either a corporation or an organization trying to do good to try and get what they want to get, higher profits or more resources. And they will try and figure out how to minimize what kind of impact that they had, not just as me as an individual, but the entire community. Not just mine, there are others. One community was like for it, even though they're not near the mine. My community was against it. Some were, and some were for it. But like causing that rift in terms of trust within communities of within each other, different community to different communities, different families, culture, definitely, because we can see iron ore dust in all of these animals that are near in and around the area. It's more expensive as a family to work around, like work through it. If there's iron ore dust within the fur, it's going to dull out your knives, your ulus. It's going to change the structure of the ice and snow around the area. Therefore, it's going to make it more expensive to maintain skidoos or any machinery. And some areas, they're melting a lot faster than others. Therefore, it's harder to read the environment. Thankfully for social media or something like that, that the information can be passed through quickly. But still, it's just kind of a little boggling that one mind can change so many different things, not just within myself, just never really had a certain trust, but trust no longer. But trust within communities, trust within how to read the environment, making sure that you have enough money to maintain your equipment. Or is the meat safe enough? Therefore, is it enough for me to feed my family? If it's not enough, then I have to go to the higher ups. But am I going to be listened to? Yeah, policy-wise, I know there's only certain policies that can be made municipally, either from territorial, provincial, even federal, or even international. There's only so many rights that we can do, but there are so many wrongs that so many can do. It's just hopefully we can keep ourselves accountable. From a small community to these big cities, provincial, federal, international. We can keep ourselves accountable so everyone can keep their trust.
Anaviapik,
And
Alex.
everyone, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay.
I think, that speaks a lot to, what you were saying even earlier about treating people as people and building relationship, that trust can be easily lost and hard to gain again. But also that I think the mine is a great example about how situations are so much more complicated than they could look at the surface than just, resource extraction or using the ocean to transport the ore. There's a lot going on. And, you mentioned not being able to understand or knowing exactly what is affecting the wildlife or all these other questions. And, that's a big piece of it is once you work with communities and once you're in, you've know people and you can have these conversations, you can start to peel away at some of the, true questions that people would like to know more about and learn about. Now, I know we can go on this tangent more, but there's a few questions that have come in. So I want to bring those up. So from the chat, we have a comment. This is from Richard B. He writes, I definitely feel the statement that people feel unheard and almost disregarded. It is something I have experience in, and many community members seem to feel as well, even if they can't articulate it. So, you know, what you were speaking to. Yeah.
I'd like to add to that the word articulate. I know how to articulate myself enough, but that's being able to articulate to someone.
Mm-hmm.
Articulation also comes with the word jargon. When you use too many jargons in a small community, no matter what kind of small community it is, even if it's a small community within a community, like LGBTQIA plus. Okay, what kind of jargon is that? Well, if it's not from someone who grew up with that term, no one really knows what it is. So therefore, you have someone might be able to be a little bit apprehensive of going into these queer safe spaces because they don't know what the jargon is. They don't know who they are. But we also have to learn how not to use the jargons so we can learn how to be people first, so we can actually have a conversation. But not only with the queer terms, but with any terms. Like Inuit Kayumaya Dokangit, it's my first language, or IQ for short. That's my jargon, because jargon means it's these big words that the other person might, or the other party may not be able to understand or articulate enough. So less jargon, the better.
Keep muting myself, or more time to explain things, right? To
Yeah.
really unpack. Excellent. I want to jump to another question. You know, lots to talk about. So this question here, by the way, Koyanamik, Richard, that was an excellent input. So this question comes from Ken Burton. Question is, how can we assist Inuit and other Indigenous groups to gain international or national recognized credentials to work on expedition or cruise ships?
So within Canada, I do know that under the government of Nunavut, along with Adventure Canada also sponsored this small vessel operation proficiency course that started in 2017 and then 2019 as an official. Picked up again this past May. So any and all Inuit or anyone within these indigenous, specifically Nunavut, these Inuit youth can take these courses to get your SVOP, ROCMC, STCW, passenger safety management. Not already taken it, but to take these courses outside of Nunavut, because we also have Inuit within Greenland, NWT, Yukon, and Alaska, and in Eastern Siberia, is kind of the same model that the GN, or Government of Nunavut, and Adventure Canada did, is partner up with an organization, either their own municipal government or within the territorial government, and a corporate cruise, and someone within the cruise industry, a sponsor. Bring these kids. I feel old. Excuse me, but bring these youth or anyone who's interested within these with this cruise industry, and give them their certificates. Give them the tools to learn how to present. So I could do this. I'm going on a ship, and I could do this. Throat singing, drum dancing, flora, fauna, history, prehistory, you name it. I could do it, but not everyone has these tools. So you bring in the government municipal or territorial with one of the companies and start doing it. Also, I'm also part of a oxen expedition network where I'm an ambassador with them, where we partnered up with 3 different companies, and instead of having these training opportunities that was already sponsored, is what we're doing with oxen is we're switching the narrative in terms of, well, for me, my contract is, here's the date, here's the end date, and that's it. Not a lot of options for me to get on or off. Thankfully, I don't have any kids, so I can travel, but there are so many that have families. There's so many that need to take a certain amount of time off, not the entirety of their annual vacation, because they would like to use those vacation days for hunting or camping, or even if they have one too many sick days and therefore they can't take anymore. So what we're doing is turning the narrative with these companies is these Inuit, they can either bring their partners as a paid guest. They don't want to if they don't want to do any presentations, they don't have to. And then they give us the dates that they're available, and that's it. They can either get on or off wherever they're sent to, not the exact same date or the end date of a contract. And they can bring in their kids if they like to, and there are presentations available if they want to, and therefore we can provide these informations, these slides, to how to present or how to build these relationships, either my company, as a company and a community. Because if we don't see a lot of Inuit on board, like Pond Inlet is the gateway to the Northwest Passage, so we see majority, if not all, of these cruise ships coming into the Northwest Passage, sometimes getting out too. And we know which ones have Inuit on board, and we're very excited to see them again, or say hi to a cousin, or they see families that we've never seen before. So it's really fun and exciting. Hopefully we can have more companies to do that kind of work. I know it's slowly getting there, but if you know where to look, point them into the right directions. Like, there you go.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I want to acknowledge and thank Lori. She's been waiting patiently with her questions. So Lori,
Sorry.
if you have a moment, unmute yourself and please ask your question.
Do I start my video as well?
Is among ne?
If you'd like, yes.
Unnok sakut. Sibudlang mit Alex kuyarigo magabit baginilak tusang me okadlak kabe na
Wake.
okaw sariya tidlo surang mata upigyak chocolate. Inuit kubvasakataw yumadlugit apirinakakit. So first of all, thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. I am very impressed with how informative you have been during this virtual presentation. I'm going to ask you a question related to the amazing knowledge that Inuit do have, because I completely agree with the message that you're sharing. And the best example I can give is when I had attended a conference in Newfoundland. It was hosted by the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, and it was a sailing summit. And in that summit, they were very much focused on advancing the need to use science-based evidence to pursue policy changes. Meanwhile, in that summit, there were East Coast seal hunters, there were Inuit, there were amazing, skilled people that I know are being left out of the ability to help make policy change because they don't necessarily have the scientific academic colonial knowledge that are being used as standards. So my question to you is, I guess, asking if you could give a better description of just how huge, for example, Inuit Kauyimayatukangit is. So, for example, scientists, people who are academic, the way they gain their knowledge is probably like 90% in a classroom and not out on the land. Whereas for Inuit Kauyimayatukangit, it's all gained through on the land because that's the environment that Inuit have always grown up in. And so they are the actual experts and not necessarily the academic scientists who might have only done a summer or two in field work. And so that level of knowledge is not being if you could share a bit of your perspective, maybe expand on that a little bit more. Kuyanami.
Ati Kuyanami Lori, wait, long time no see. I missed you. Ita. So I have another two-part answer to your question. There is, I know, like Inuit Kauyimayatukangit is for those who don't really know what IQ is, or IQ for short. It's traditional knowledge, not just what's like. There are 8 different points of traditional knowledge or practices, or for those in Southern Indigenous populations, you may have these different teachings or different guidelines of traditional knowledge or knowledge keepers. So what IQ is, it's not just having these 8 different points of how to live life. It's all lived in, it's lived within, it's who we are. Even though it's already defined, it's not necessarily defined on paper because it's within us. It's within who we are. And trying to convey that in a more articulate perspective, or in an articulate policies, and making sure that we're heard as Inuit or any Indigenous population is really hard, because the foundation of how Indigenous populations are being heard is not there. There's ethical departments in each university. So you get your bachelor's, your master's, and your PhD, but any and all research that you have to do, you have to go through ethics. Not every ethics board has an Inuk or Inuit or all the Indigenous populations to conduct or get passed through their ethics, to start conducting their research or to learn how to change policies. So if the academic writing is not there within policy, within federal, territorial, or provincial, or any of all organizations, that's where you learn how to start making these words. Because you can't necessarily start if you don't have the language. But once you have the language, even though Inuit or any Indigenous population, this is what we've always been telling you, then therefore it's not just within their side to learn how to listen, but also how to get ours in terms of here is these words in English or within research or within policy language of how to do the research or how to make the policies or how to change a policy. Because communication is not just a one-way street. We have to figure out how to do that. So we have to find the language, and make it a collective, not just one organization versus another. But also the other part is there is another amazing group that I was with, still am, called ECOP, IKAARVIK. So ECOP, you can also go to ecop.org, where we have these amazing Inuit youth researchers in different communities within the Arctic. And within these little communities, we partner up with a researcher from the South, but we see the person first instead of the research. if the person does not know, doesn't necessarily fit well together in terms of how they can listen to us, then we don't want to work with them. And our group here, it's we were one of the Arctic Inspiration Prizes the other year, which is amazing. But not only that, we created several years ago, we created this document called SciQ, SCIQ. So 2 words, thanks to Jonathan Pitsiolak from Pondonlet, an amazing young philosopher. He's younger than me, but he's just has an amazing, he's an old soul, basically, but he put these 2 words together, science and IQ, because we wanted to figure out what's the difference between the two. What's the difference between tradition and research? From what we found out, having this amazing gathering, if you will, this conference several years ago, we created this document called SciQ, Science in Inuit Kayumaya Tukangit, Research and Meaningful Engagement of Northern Indigenous Communities, recommendations from the ECOP Youth Summit. And it's several pages worth of here's what you do pre-research. So before you start doing research, during your research, and then after your research. During the before research, you have to go through your ethics, et cetera, befriend the community and befriend someone. During your research, still be a human, but there are a lot of research within these small communities or any Arctic communities that don't have the after. When they don't have the after, not sharing the information that they've gathered, not sharing the information that resulted in an answer from a question, there's already a severed connection. When there's too many severed connections, you already feel used, not just as an individual, but within a community. When you feel used enough, then not every community wants to participate in either making policies changing, or either in conducting research or helping research or being part of any and all activities, not just being a bear monitor, but any activity. So having that communication, the connection, the friendship, being a person, and making sure that you developed that language and how to change policy and how to change research, that's when you start going. That's when things are starting to move a lot faster, because the community's heard, and then other policies or any research or any jargon for that matter is already changing. Yeah. Hello?
Thanks, Alex. Sam just actually had to run.
Okay.
So I'll take over the questions. Just gonna look at the chat. But Carol just made a comment. She said, "Hi, I've been on the board of directors for Travel in Nunavut for the past 7 years." All good. There you are. And we would love to have more Inuit on our board for them to share their voices and how to deal with tourism in Nunavut. Any suggestions?
Yes, so Cruise Nunavut, that was one of the programs that I was with, but also I know ECOP, Arctic Expedition Cruise Organizations. It's a lot of different companies putting together as not a government body, but a major organization within Arctic and Antarctic cruise industry. They don't have one for major community engagement within Canada just yet. Not that I've seen. I know may have been something started, but never really continued. But that's one way of saying, hey, we would like to have more Inuit on board. If you have any which way and how we can involve them, look at the company first. Do they have Inuit staff on board? If they have Inuit staff on board, are they certified or not certified? If they're not certified, then they can be a paid guest. If they want to have that community engagement within the Inuit population or any Indigenous population, either in any cruise industry, is there already a training involved? If not, then how do you provide the training? If each company that's kind of coming in through, if they already started their own thing, but if they're moving too slow, then look for another company that's already partnered up. So with Oxen Expedition Network, we're slowly growing, and we don't want to grow too fast, too quick, but it's a start. So we have this community ambassador program. That's what I was talking about earlier, but that's a start. So if you look at oxennetwork.com or .org, either one of those two, go check it out. And how to involve with the cruise industry, look at the tourism department within government or any territory to see if they already have a program. And if you want Inuit on board, is who has the experience that we're on board, and can they mentor someone within that? And are they willing to mentor? Therefore, if we do mentor, it's growing organically. If you're growing organically, it's going to be a lot stronger than just popping someone saying, hey, we have this opportunity, you want to come on board? Yeah. Sorry if I do ramble. Does that answer your question?
I'll let Carol chime in the chat if not. But thanks so much, Alex, for answering all these questions and your insights. We just have a couple of minutes left, so I just wanted to open it up to the audience if anyone has a question. And if not, Alex, if you have anything else you'd like to say, any closing remarks, if no other questions come through, then that'd be great too.
I'm still an open book. Reach out to ECOP if you want to reach out to me through here. Available for any conversation still until the end of July. Then that's where I have to travel for about 60 days. And thank you for having me. And thanks so much for ECOP for making sure that we're starting this sort of conversation. And it just feels really good. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alex. Really appreciate you speaking. So if everyone wants to just thank Alex, maybe give her a round of applause. And yeah, Alex, if you have anything you would like us to follow up with the participants with, let us know. Otherwise, yeah, thank you so much.
Again, if I didn't answer any questions, I'm available till the end of July, then I gotta go till September.
Have a great time in the field.
But
yeah, we'll be in touch for sure.